For years, she remained silent. Siddle Curry was the kind of presence that almost goes unnoticed, not for lack of importance, but by choice. She didn't seek the spotlight. She preferred to stay behind the scenes. While her brother, Steph Curry, shined on NBA courts, breaking records, winning championships, and drawing crowds around the world, Siddle was there, always nearby, always present, but quiet. She was the smile at the edge of family photos, the discreet figure in the stands with an attentive gaze, celebrating each basket. She was behind the scenes of grand celebrations, in private meetings, insincere embraces that happened far from cameras. But nobody knew who she was, and for a long time, she didn't care about that. Until one ordinary day, the kind that seems small but becomes enormous in someone's life, Siddle decided to speak. It wasn't on a reality show. It wasn't on a sensationalist program. It was on a podcast, an intimate space, almost therapeutic, and there, seated before a microphone, she opened her heart. There was no scandal, no accusation, no controversy, just a truth. A truth kept for years, whispered only in prayers, lovingly protected from the noise of social media and the expectations imposed on her family. It was a profound truth, serene, painful, and beautiful at the same time. And when she spoke, the world, accustomed to ignoring gentle voices, stopped to listen. The interview began like any other, simple questions, contained smiles. But then came the moment, that pause between words that precedes something important. Siddle took a deep breath and said, "I never wanted what he has. I just wanted him around." It was in this phrase that everything changed, because there was pain there, and also peace. It was the kind of revelation that doesn't explode. It echoes. It grows slowly inside those who listen and transforms. Throughout the conversation, she talked about the invisible weight of being, the sister of a legend, about what it's like to live in the shadow of someone the whole world admires. She spoke of the emotional backstage that nobody sees, of days of silence, of internal struggles, of moments when she felt lost. She didn't ask for pity. There was no victimhood. There was courage, and there was also love. Because above all, that was a story of love between siblings. Not idealized, perfect love, but real love, made of presence, silence, phone calls in the middle of the night. The kind of love that doesn't need a stage, that doesn't need to be seen, just felt. And on that day, when she decided to speak, it wasn't to shine. It was to heal, to understand. The depth of Siddle's words. One needed to go back in time. Long before the trophies, before the packed stands, before the interviews, million-dollar contracts, and spotlights. Back to the Curry home. The house where it all began was full of life and full of faith. Del Curry, the father, was a respected name in basketball, but at home, he was the example, demanding, present, committed. The mother, Sonia, was the heart of the family. Spiritual, firm, loving. A woman of solid values, who not only cared for her children, but taught them to care for each other. Siddle and Steph grew up in an environment where sports were routine, but never an obligation. It was natural, like breakfast on the table, like prayer before bed. The basketball was part of the scenery as much as the open Bible on the living room shelf. And there, between games in the yard and Sunday worship, a silent connection grew between the two siblings. The world would come to know Steph as the prodigy, the phenomenon. But for Siddle, he was always just Steph, the brother with an easy laugh, who shared pizza slices with her, who made her laugh when the day was tough. He was the boy who protected her in school fights, who knew exactly when she was pretending to be okay. The brother who held her hand. On stormy nights, they were inseparable. Childhood was made of sweet memories, school tournaments, backyard parties, family trips, but also of tense moments, the kind that only those who live behind the scenes of sports understand. City changes, constant pressures, external expectations, knocking on the door far too early. And with time, their paths began to separate. Steph began to stand out, first at school, then at university, and then the NBA, consecration. The world finally saw what Sidel had always known. Her brother's talent wasn't ordinary. But with his fame also came her silence, not out of envy, never, but out of respect, because she knew how much he carried. And she didn't want to be one more burden. She preferred to step back, stay behind the curtains. And there, in the shadow, she built her own journey without making noise. She studied psychology, got involved with social causes, worked with young people, with women, made empathy her mission, and even with cameras focused on her brother, her light, though gentle, began to shine among those who crossed her path. Yet behind this serenity were silent battles, the kind of battle the world doesn't see, because it doesn't bleed on the outside, but it hurts inside. And still, in each of Steph's achievements, there she was, smiling, applauding, cheering, not because he was famous, but because he was her brother. And that was enough. Sidel's voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, clear, and primarily honest. For years, she had learned to listen, to hear the questions that were never asked of her, but that she heard directed at her brother, to smile politely when her name was ignored in family interviews, to accept that, to the world, she was just Steph Curry's sister. But on the podcast, for the first time, she was just Sidel. And there, between one question and another, she blossomed. The conversation seemed simple, even ordinary, but something changed when she spoke of pain. Not physical pain, everyone understands that. It was emotional pain, the kind that doesn't show up on an X-ray, that doesn't have a medical code, that lives hidden behind functional smiles. With courage, she talked about the miscarriages she suffered, about the feeling of emptiness, of guilt, of silence. She spoke about the anxiety attacks that paralyzed her in the middle of the night, about the moments when she felt she wasn't enough, not as a woman, not as a daughter, not as a sister. Sometimes it seems like you need to achieve something gigantic just to be noticed, but I just wanted to be heard. It was such a simple request, and at the same time, so profound. During the interview, her words didn't come with anger, nor with accusation, but with a kind of a truth that calms, that cleanses, that reorganizes the soul. And that's when she spoke about Steph. Not the star, not the MVP, but the brother. The guy who would text at 2 a.m. just to ask, "Are you able to sleep?" The guy who would show up unannounced, with coffee in hand and a concerned look. The one who would sit on the floor next to her and say nothing, just stay, present. The Steph on the covers is yours, but the Steph who saves me is only mine. It was in this silent presence that she found healing, because when everything seemed to be falling apart, when the pressure, sadness, and comparisons began to weigh too heavily, he would go back to being that boy in the room next door, the one who prayed with her before sleep, the one who held her hand during storms, the one who never left her alone, even when the whole world was looking only at him. The podcast didn't go viral for scandals. It didn't become a headline for controversies. It went viral because it was real, because it touched on something that many people hide: the fear of not being seen, of not being enough, of being just a supporting character in someone else's life. But Sidel's story wasn't about envy. It was about love. A love that doesn't appear on the scoreboard, but that sustains life. The image was simple, but carried a strength that words could hardly translate. Two siblings sitting on the floor, side by side, crying, in silence, and praying. Perhaps there was the summary of everything Seidel tried to explain, because in that scene, there was no fame. There were no crowds, no trophies, contracts, or headlines. There was only love. Naked, raw, real. The kind of love that endures. In times when families seem to drift apart due to packed schedules, ego disputes, or differences in values, the relationship between Seidel and Steph is almost a silent manifesto, a reminder that it's still possible to cultivate genuine bonds, that there's still space to sit on the floor and listen, to hold the other's hand without needing to say anything. Some people think that fame changes people. It might even change, but it never changed who he is to me. This phrase, spoken with wet eyes and a choked voice, summarizes what many families forget over time: the essence. Steph was always the brother who shined, but he was also always the one who came back home, the one who didn't let fame speak louder than bonds, the one who kept the door open, the attentive ear, the available heart. And Seidel, well, Seidel was the one who sustained all of this in silence, who welcomed absence with maturity, who respected his space even while missing him, who chose to heal instead of demanding. The podcast revealed more than a personal story. It exposed a reality shared by many: the fear of being forgotten within one's own home, the anguish of feeling small next to someone who has become giant. But it also brought hope, because the Curry story isn't perfect, it's real, full of flaws, silences, distances, but also full of reconciliation, faith, and love. A love that isn't proven with grand gestures, but with small details. A message in the middle of the night, a look that recognizes, an embrace that comes before words. Seidel didn't tell her story to be applauded, nor to gain followers. She told it because she understood that pain, when shared with truth, can heal. Not just the one who speaks, but also those who listen. And she touched millions. Perhaps because somewhere, each of us has someone we miss, someone with whom we've lost emotional contact, someone who is still nearby, but distant. Perhaps what this story tells us, deep down, is that it's never too late to sit on the floor, to start over, to speak, or simply to listen. Because, in the end, what really shocks isn't success. It's the beauty of real love, and true success, as Seidel showed the world, isn't in public victories. It's in the hands extended behind the scenes.